Okay. All right, welcome everybody to our special meeting. Today is August 9th, 2022. We are here to discuss the moving forward with the library for potential library purchase. Now, again, a little grace as we work with Granicus. I legislate for only the second time. So if we're a little clunky, I apologize. So we'll do a quick call to order. So 6 o'clock on August 9th, and then we will proceed to roll call. Councilmember Cargill.
Present.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Present.
Councilmember Van Orn.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Follier. Okay, I know he's trying to, so Councilmember Spencer,
Here.
Councilmember Dunn,
Happy to be here.
Councilmember Salberg.
Here.
All right, so until Mayor Pro Tem until he can join, do we have a motion to excuse him?
Move to excuse Councilmember Follier.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. You want to hit, can we do a motion? Kelsey, are we live?
It's not on yet.
Yeah, we can't enter the.
Okay, all right, we'll just keep, we'll keep rolling. So first, motion by Councilmember Dunn, second by Councilmember Van Orman. Any discussions or questions? Not seeing any motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes to excuse Mayor Pro Tem 6-0. Okay, some notes here. All right, next on our agenda. We are up to agenda approval. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as printed?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Dunn and a second by Councilmember Salberg. Any questions, additions, comments? All right, not hearing any. All in favor of approving the agenda as printed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, not hearing any. Any opposition? Motion passes 6-0. Navigating through. All right, we are up to citizen comments. So as we do at every meeting, we have a chance for citizen comments at the beginning and end of the meeting. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and you'll see a timer up on the screen. So those in chambers, if you can fill out a yellow form real quick so we can have your name and contact information. And then if anybody online would like to make a comment, please send a note to Todd Henderson, our meeting host, in the chat feature, and he will let me know if there's someone ready who wants to speak. All right, we've got a couple of yellow forms here. All right, we'll go ahead and start with those who are in person. Shauna Dean, welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Shauna Dean. I am a resident of Liberty Lake, and I was coming to talk about the purchase of the building for the library. I am also on the Library Board of Trustees, and we have Jandy, our library director, here, and we have Brad and Tim. Sorry, I'm a little flustered. I was thinking the meeting was at 7 and I rushed over. My own fault. So I want to remind everybody that there was a library feasibility study that was done. Our current library is about 9,000 square feet, and we need much more than that for a library of our community's size. And the new building, which is about, they had recommended about 16,000 square feet for a library of our size. The new building is about 14,500 square feet. So it just about meets the needs of what the library and the community needs. The community is in desperate need of community meeting spaces and gathering spaces. The library itself puts on a number of events for the community, which I know are really well attended. And this is an opportunity that the city council can seize to meet the needs of the library without having to go through full construction of a new facility. And I'm not quite sure, but I do know that Jandy has brought up the issue of grant funds being used, and the state we may be able to utilize those state grant funds for the purchase of a building for the library. So that's also an option that may be there to help with the purchase.
Great.
And so I think we're the library board of trustees, I think in general is in favor of this. I know I personally am in favor of purchasing a larger building to meet the library's needs.
Thank you very much, Shauna.
Thank
you. All right, next we have Tim Olson.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'm Tim Olson, a resident of Liberty Lake. I think the purchase of this building is brilliant. It shows a commitment to this council, to the citizens of Liberty Lake, in order to get what they've asked for years. We need more space. While nothing's ever perfect, I believe this, based on some of the numbers I've been able to see, is an interesting idea. And I think it's an opportunity to take advantage of. Not only is location there, but the facility itself appears to be adequate. I don't know, I'm not smart enough to understand where they come up with these figures in terms of how much square foot we need per person, but this is certainly an improvement. And I don't think we should wrestle over that idea. It's important that we listen to the citizens. I've been on the board of trustees for a number of years, and that's all we're doing. During COVID, during the last 2 years, we've seen opportunities in the library that have been not taken advantage of because we don't have the space for it. This will give us a space. This will give us some flexibility. And I appreciate this council considering this and moving forward. Even if it's not tomorrow, we have an opportunity to get this thing done over time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. All right, just a reminder for those in the audience, we do have one more speaker in person, but if anybody in the audience would like to make a comment during this citizen comment section, send a note to Todd Henderson in the chat feature. All right, we have Brad Hamblett next.
Phil was online.
Oh, yeah, yes, thank you. So if we can note that Mayor Pro Tem was able to join us.
Hello, my name is Brad Hamblett. I'm also a citizen of a resident of the city. I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees. If you will remember back in March, the Board of Trustees presented a review of the current state of the library and I guess assessment done by the community assessment in regards to the library and its needs. And I think, well, it's apparent to me that has been heated and grabbed some attention. And I'm very happy to see that there was a quick response to a building that I think can make a real big difference for the library and our citizenry. I'm curious to see what the feasibility report will say tonight about that building. But having had the opportunity to walk through that building, I see tremendous potential. As Shauna said earlier, the assessment recommends a 16,000 square foot building. And that's based on, they gave us a range, 14 to 16,000 square feet. So with this building, we are right in that range. And has already been mentioned, our library is a vital part of our community. The programming they provide for youth and teens is I don't even know if you can put a value on all of that because it's used by those age groups extensively. It's used by all of our community and even members outside of our community I've seen come in and utilize the library. The current building that being considered, I think has enormous potential in terms of being able to be basically designed on the inside from nothing to meet the needs of a modern day library and the needs of our community. So I'm encouraging the council to continue to move forward with the purchase, considering that the feasibility study gives us that go ahead, I guess, in being able to make this building happen. I will say one last thing. This is far better than trying to purchase or build a new building. And I know there have been other communities, one that I moved from that just recently did the same thing, purchased the building and renovated it into a very beautiful library. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brad. All right, next up, we have Sue Hamblett. Any relation?
I'm Sue Hamblett, and I'm one of the friends of the library. We're the booster club for the library, all the programs, well, not all of them. A lot of the educational programs are funded by what the friends raise, but we might be able to come up with a lot of educational opportunities, but with a lack of space, it means, well, we can't always do it. I'm very excited about what we saw when we went through the building. I have to admit, I started seeing the opportunities for so many people to be able to participate in the library that might not have before, because now we have the space to go even further. And the more inclusive we are as a community, it tends to lessen the boundaries and thus make us more of a community instead of so adversarial as sometimes the case could be. And so I'm really looking forward to having the space to give our community more than what we ever expected in our lifetime to have. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. All right, Todd, do we have anybody online who would like to make a comment? Okay, just one more quick call. If you'd like to make a comment and you're joining us remotely, please send a quick note to Todd Henderson in the chat.
I have some written comments
Great.
to acknowledge
Well,
also.
Great, while we're waiting on that, go ahead, Kelsey. We've got a couple written comments.
So we received written public comments, all from Liberty Lake residents regarding the potential library building purchase, from Bob and Pat Scadam, Mindy Howe, and Marcia Binder. And those were all shared with council and the mayor.
Thank you very much. So Todd, one last call. Nope. All right, so we'll move on. There will be another chance for citizen comment at the end of the meeting. All right, so that brings us to the workshop. I do want to give a shout out to the team who was able to put this study together on a very short notice. So Jonathan and Kelly and hold on, I don't have you guys up on my screen. There you are all on the call tonight. If you have any questions about the feasibility study, I know it's kind of, again, you guys kind of got it halfway through the day today. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to go through that, but I thought maybe we'd start with Kyle going through the funding piece of it. He has updated the funding in sources for 2022 and 2023 and put them all conveniently on one sheet so we can compare them side by side. You want to share?
Thanks, Mayor.
Do we have that to share on the screen for the?
Yeah. Let's see if I can.
Great.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council, residents. And so I did put together this one sheet just for council to be able to review where we're at for capital projects for the next couple of years and where this potential building purchase, if council so chooses, fits in with that scenario. So our real estate excise tax funds, it's 1/4% of the sale of real property in the city. Are on your left-hand side, and we can go through those in greater detail if you'd like. What we're focused on tonight is maybe a more direct impact of the purchase of the library building and where that would fall based on, our reserve balances is within either the general fund or our ARPA funds. And so As you can see, we started the year with 6.4 million in reserve in our ending cash balance for 2021. And so you can see, our major highlights in the general fund in the top right-hand table there. And so you can see how that plays out. And we're anticipating, $6.9 to $7 million ending fund balance. So pretty close to where we started at for 2022. And so when we're talking about ending cash balances, there are a couple of rules of thumb that, cities want to kind of adhere to, maintain to, and that's usually anywhere between 3 to 6 months of operational costs. And 4.98 or $5 million represents that for 2022. And so, we're currently in a good spot in terms of where we're at for the general fund. And so you can see how, if we take the cost of the library and we apply, let's say 100% of the building cost, the purchase to general fund, we can see where we would end up at the end of the year for general fund. We'd be looking at 4.7 million. So we're still right in that sweet spot of where we would like to be. Also understanding that we do have some other bigger capital costs coming down the pike as well for 2023. And so if you extrapolate that out to the end of 2023, all else being equal, that's a big if, but all else being equal, we're back down into maybe the $3.6 million range if everything holds true for the end of 2023. So we're a little bit lower than where we'd want to be, certainly not in any major red flag danger zone in terms of where we would see ourselves ending in 2023. But that's where ARPA comes in, and that's another tool that council can use to if they so choose to move forward with the library purchase. We currently have 2.58 million in that account, and we have a lot of asks for that account. And so a lot of things the council's been presented with, a lot of things for them to consider. This is another one that is obviously clearly it's a public benefit. And so I wanted council to kind of get a frame of reference for what the consequences, for lack of a better term, would be for the building purchase and how that affects, our major, two funds that would be supporting this purchase. And so
Kyle, just for a reminder for everybody, in addition to what you see here is our emergency fund that cannot be accessed without council action. So
Correct.
that dollar amount is.
Thanks, Mayor. So that's 1.3 million is in addition. That is a completely separate fund from the general fund. And that is a truly, rainy day, major recession, 08 through 11 situation where, we would have funds, in case of everything else drying up to support operations. So.
All right, does anybody have any questions as we step through this? Councilmember Cargill and then Councilmember Van Orman.
Thank you, Mayor. Kyle's a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
Trailhead improvements for 2022. I assume that's the two coupled with the 1 million that you have in 2023. That's the 2 million that was set aside for the driving range. Is that right?
That is correct. So we have the $1 million up front that they're working with right now while we finalize any sort of bond. And then the 1 million for 2023 is for the driving range.
Okay. And then so I guess I'm looking past general fund into the REIT as well. And I believe the numbers that we saw before said that the trailhead bond cost was going to be around 400 to 450 a year. Is that right?
Yep.
So is that, and we're doing that out of 2 or 1? Can you remind me?
We're doing that out of 1. And so that's a great point that you brought up, Councilmember Cargill. So you see, 200,000 coming out of REIT 1 instead of what we anticipate that full bond annual payment to be. And so all along, we are, the plan would be, if we finalize bond financing and that's the route the council chooses to go, the golf operation, any additional revenue from golf operations is going to go straight into there. They currently have a balance of right around 700,000, I'd say. And so we can make initial payments directly from Gulf operations to satisfy those bond payments.
And where's the down payment to that going to be?
So that's what you're seeing coming out of general fund.
That's the 1 million.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then the driving range that's in 2023, I thought we set aside, or we were planning for 2 million for that. Because the original cost was 8.4, then Councilmember Kurtz made the recommendation or the resolution to go down to 6.4 for the budget of the building, with the caveat that the 2 was going to be left over for the driving range. Is that?
So
Isn't that
what
accurate?
we're financing, so we're 1 million down and we're looking to finance, from my understanding was 6 million. So it was 5.4.
Right.
Then we, Boughton and OAC brought back, and Architects West brought back. Here's what we can get for 5.4. Here's
Yeah.
the expanded option.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking
Okay.
about the separation of the driving range versus the building. So the decision was made earlier that we were going to separate those two budgets because we didn't really have a good sense of what the driving range was
Right,
going to cost. And so the idea was, okay, we do 6.4 on the building. So then the remaining 2 leading us up to 8.4 could be set aside for the driving range. So I'm trying to figure out if that 2, let's say we get our estimate back next year on the driving range that says it's going to be 2 or 1.5. That number that says 1 million right now obviously would go up to 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, then I think we would investigate additional alternatives if that number did come back at 2, because from my recollection, the split was 1 million down towards the building and then 1 million for the driving range.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Van Orman.
So I'm still trying to track all of the things that we've got juggling.
You
So
get
we've
your
got all of the things that we have juggling. So Trailhead. So we're talking about 6 million that we need to set aside, and that's based on how many years? 20 years?
So the 6 million would be what we finance we would finance 6 million.
And
Okay.
the 450,000
Would be the
Every year.
annual payment. Yeah,
would be an annual payment for 20 years?
correct. Yeah.
Okay, so what other capital expenses do we have that we've been talking about, and are they all included in what you've just given us?
They are. Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
You made it very easy. Thank you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from here in council chambers or Councilmember Kurtz or Mayor Pro Tem Follier? Go ahead, Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. My question is, you made a comment about capital projects in 23. That's not on here, I understand, but I was just looking at that list. What are you anticipating in 23, 24?
So 23, you can see on the second table of each of these sheets what our anticipated capital costs are in 2023. 2024, it's fairly minimal, and we are going to discuss that a little bit further during our capital facilities workshop next month. But we can.
And the only major thing I see is the Country Vista rebuild.
Correct. And so I don't have that in front of me, but yes, that is on there.
And no other big projects beyond that in our 6th year.
So we do have a couple of potential big ones that are a few years out. We have our Appleway, frontage improvements, I want to say, is going to be in the neighborhood of $2 million.
It
But
is.
different avenues for funding that. And so
Right.
I think it would be, it would be a blow if we ended up fronting the entire bill for that.
Yeah, Lisa can
So,
jump in if I'm
yeah.
wrong, but I believe we're going after TIB grant. for that.
TIB, and then there's some other potential mechanism. Obviously, the federal infrastructure money that's also coming down the pike is absolutely something we will have to take advantage of. And so we really should.
So those next 2 big projects coming up in 2 to 3 years are subject to some form, hopefully, of reimbursement. We don't know how much, but
Absolutely. And that's the goal. And that's really the hard part of forecasting is you have all of these funds out there that are available for the taking. And we can have, just like last year, we had Kramer Parkway reconstruction. We had an ironclad grant application out to TIB, and that was a gut punch when we found out that that was not funded. And so you have to pivot and come up with those funds in-house. And so that is absolutely not something that we anticipate is going to be a normal going forward. So.
Councilmember Solberg.
So Kyle, thank you for doing this for us. If you could just look over on the general fund capital projects, I'm gonna leave the REIT on 1, 2 and ARPA. If I'm understanding this right, including the expenses for Kramer Overpass and Trailhead, the Harvard Roundabout, the driving range and City Hall parking. At the end of 2022, we're close to $7 million. If we took the $2 million that we're looking at for this library project out of our general fund, our bottom line, using all this same information we have in front of us, would be that we would still have $4.9-ish million left. And then we still have our emergency funds. Is that correct?
That is correct. So yeah, 4.7 to 4.9 when this is all said and done after the purchase of the library.
Well, then I'm going to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Follier said before and support that we use the money out of the general fund to fund the library.
All right, Councilmember Kurtz.
I think my question centers around, I understand kind of the cost for the library and where we might fund that from in and amongst the other projects that we're committed to at this point. But I also noticed that there are some capital improvements to the not capital improvements, improvements to the library that may be necessary, tenant improvements, mechanical, that sort of thing. And I'm wanting to kind of understand and hear everybody's thoughts on how and when those things could potentially be funded too, because I see the library, the purchase of the building, but also making it operational and usable space for everybody. And that was at least $1.5-ish million too. So I kind of want to understand thoughts on when and how those things will be funded.
So Councilmember Kurtz, if you don't mind, my next plan was to go over that feasibility study first, and then we can circle back around to that if that's okay. All right, and Councilmember Dunn, did you have anything to add?
I concur with Solberg about the general fund is a good target for the use of the funds for the purchase. Thanks.
All right, anybody else before we go in?
Yeah, I'll chime in.
Councilmember Spitzer, forgot you there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm not sure who could potentially answer this, and perhaps it's Jandy. When we heard that potentially we could get some grant funding for, is it for the purchase or for the improvements? And if either or, do we know more or less what we could possibly expect?
So there is potential grant money for the improvements is what I would say now, because we've already missed like the grant application. So it's through the State Department of Commerce. It's Institution of Library and Museums. We could apply for a grant. It's a matching grant. So say we put in 1 million, they put in 1 million or whatever the dollar amount that you want it to be. There are specific requirements for it. We don't check every single one of the boxes. The box that we don't check is that we are not a rural library, and our library is not historical, but we do meet the remainder of the requirements. But yes, potentially it could have been used to purchase or to renovate a building. You just have to agree to stay in that building for 10 years, which we obviously would be doing if we were building a new library.
Yeah, and I've been doing some digging as well. And I know Jandy's been doing some more digging. There's way more grant funding out there for libraries than I ever would have imagined. It's a matter of getting through all the information. So I know Jandy's got a big network who can probably steer her in the right direction as well.
Yeah, so I had a meeting with the Sarah Jones, who's the state librarian over in Olympia about it.
And so she said that was the only box that she didn't see that we checked, was that we're not historical or rural. So
So
Yeah.
that wouldn't necessarily disqualify us from getting any funds. It's just less
No,
likely.
it just
compared to
doesn't put
somebody who
us,
comes
you
with
know-
a historical rural library.
yes.
Okay.
But if you look on the list of libraries that have utilized that fund, it's like a whole page of them, including, you know, Seattle Public Library, the Spokane Public Library, the Spokane County Library District. So it's just one of those things where it's a huge process, but something very much worth undertaking if we go ahead with the purchase.
So without going into the details of the improvements, do we have any idea how soon we would need to start allocating those funds? I'm not sure who we would need, who I'm asking that question to, but
So we might want to, let's hit a quick pause on, we'll add that to Councilmember Kurtz's question.
okay.
But maybe we get through the feasibility, thanks, Jandy. Get through the feasibility study and any questions, and then we can go back, look at a timeline and whatnot. And so if there's no more questions, you know, we go through the feasibility study. Again, sorry, I know everybody got it around noonish today, right after I did. So I've plowed through it. I know we've got the bottom line, which I will just kind of call out again, and we can go through the details. So let me get there. So the bottom line for the feasibility study included architectural and fire sprinkler costs. And this is all in today, 2022 dollars, knowing that we wouldn't start any renovations until early 2024. Architecture and fire sprinkler costs, $566,000. Mechanical costs, $523,000, electrical, $483,000, coming into a total about just under 1.6. And then there's some additional notes about roof replacement in 8 to 10 years, a couple of HVAC replacement units in about 10 years as well. And then some of the other soft costs and whatnot, and FF&E that are not included. So you're looking at the high level things, you know, there's a lot of stuff at the library that we can reuse. There's also $90,000 in the library capital fund that is available. And I would like to, when we get to that point, propose that we move the $100,000 that we had allocated to the library for 2022 for architect and things like that, for temporary improvements to be moved to the library capital fund. So we would start off with about $190,000 in that library capital fund to get us going. So I guess who wants to go first with regards to questions on the feasibility study? Councilmember Cargill.
Thank you, Mayor.
And then Councilmember Follier.
So I have a couple of questions. One, how many, if any, of these improvements are needed now? In other words, if we took control of the building, bought the building, the church stays there for a year and a half or whatever the timeline is, are we going to have to make any of these improvements between now and then?
Yes, thank you for your question. So the numbers that I had listed, that 1.572 that the mayor had mentioned, so those would be the tenant improvements that would be required for you to occupy the building. Based on how the building is currently permitted, this would most likely trigger a change in use, which is going to trigger fire sprinklers. You're going to have to bring it up to the current energy code, and then just some of the basic stuff like you're going to want to put in the T-bar ceiling, so you have the T-bar ceiling throughout the building, new flooring, and a fresh coat of paint. So those really are, you know, the energy code stuff, the fire sprinklers. There's really no way around that. And then just demolishing the existing walls and building new office spaces, things like that.
So obviously some of that can't be done until we get in there and demo.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm talking, and I understand all that from reading through the report. I'm talking right now. If we're the landlord, are there any costs right now that we're going to have to take on? Or as the mayor said, is most of this going to be when we go to demolish and then start rebuilding it for the purposes of the library?
The only thing I would really suggest right now is just some of the caulking. A lot of the caulking around the building appears to be the original caulking, and that is not a big deal. I mean, that's routine maintenance you have to do on every building, you have to do in your house. I would suggest doing that just for the potential of water intrusion, just a little security measure. But other than that, the rest of it could wait for 18 months out.
Okay, I guess my other questions or highlights that I wanted to make sure that we discussed have to do with section 11A of the report. So the sales tax and other soft costs were not included in that 1.5. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then I think it's important to point out the mention that you made about the state energy code once we go to do it. I noticed on the report here that it looks like several of the furnaces are gas powered, which it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that because of the state energy code, we will have to move away from those when we go to do it. Is that correct?
You actually bring up a great point that unfortunately our mechanical engineer couldn't make the call tonight. Because I know it's June of 2023. I'm not quite sure on those exact rules. And Kelly, we also have Kelly Waterman on the call, who's the electrical engineer. I'm not sure if Kelly might know that by chance. I think actually in the industry, there's a little bit of confusion on what triggers that and when. So I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, and I don't know that even mechanical engineers fully have a grasp on it right now until it officially is rolled out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I guess one other point I would just make to your question on cost, I would continuously evaluate some of the lead times of this equipment, because if you're thinking of cash flow, you may need to order some of this electrical equipment a year in advance. So you might need to put some money down for that. Same thing with mechanical equipment, just if from a cash flow perspective.
And in addition to, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, in addition to the AC units, which you mentioned probably need to be replaced in the next 8 to 10 years. You made a mention in the report that the entire lighting system has to be torn out and replaced. Can you explain a little more about that?
I'll let Kelly answer that.
Sure. And this goes back to the Washington State Energy Code again, but when you remodel a facility, well, one, when you change the use, it pretty much triggers the baseline energy code. And then in terms of lighting and lighting controls, if you meet certain criteria, one of which is you're reconfiguring wall partitions, so either knocking out walls or adding in new walls, basically changing the floor plan, then they require you to bring the lighting system up to code in terms of power density. So how much energy per square foot the lighting system is using, and also automated lighting controls. And so the existing building doesn't have any automated lighting controls. It's all basically just toggle switches like you'd see at your house. And then almost everything is fluorescent lamps, at least outside of the auditorium area. So those can be a maintenance headache anyway, and they're all but obsolete in new construction. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And it's going to be an easy building to put new lighting and new electrical systems in, just because the way it currently sits, it's very open. So it's not going to be a laborious installation like some other buildings, but yes, we would be looking at a new lighting and control system for a remodel of this type.
And
Thank
that's
you.
included in the cost on here.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, got Mayor Pro Tem next.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
You can.
Perfect. Thank you. In your report, and I don't know who's going to answer these questions, but I'll just fire away. How about that?
Sure.
In your report, it says if a fire suppression system is required, is it or is it not? We don't know.
There's different interpretations of the code. Most likely you will need to add a fire suppression system. But you really won't know until you really dive into it. But most likely you will, just based on the change of use.
Okay, and then when I saw the mechanical and the electrical numbers, it tipped me over, to be honest with you, because in there I'm assuming you're replacing the 3 temp star units, and you say that the other 2 carrier units have a 10-year life. Still have 10 years in them, and those could be replaced for $50,000. So how much are these temp stars? You're not redoing, you're just redoing the roof units. You're not redoing any interior ductwork, correct?
There probably will be some reconfiguration, just to distribute the air appropriately, get the proper cooling. And in addition to that, there will be a DOAS unit or a dedicated outside air unit. You're gonna have to increase the capacity of the system. The current system's not adequate. You'll need to
I saw
increase
that.
it. So I think about $33 a square foot was the number that the mechanical engineer had used, given the scope of the project.
I mean, it just got my attention. We just replaced 3 units on the police department for under 200. So that's why I questioned that number. It seems right up there, given that's not a finished building on the inside. And the same with the electrical. I know your recommendation is to get rid of the 3 200 amp services and the 100 and go to 1, but is there a reason for that? I mean, do we have to do that? If you're going to eventually change over, be forced, which is unbelievable to me, to be forced to switch from gas to electric on the rooftop units, then maybe you need to save those services for that.
Well, it's configured basically for a multi-tenant space, right? So there is a 1200 amp bus, but each service disconnect is only rated, well, the biggest one is 200 amps. There's 3 200 amp services and then 100 amp service. And based on discussions with the mechanical engineer on the load that he's expecting, like we might not, like any one of those panels might not even, our service disconnects might not even be able to take on the whole mechanical load on its own. So, you know, you could probably try to shoehorn that and pay 4 separate utility bills on it. But for a project like this with gear that's already 20 years old and a complete reconfiguration of the type of facility down to a single tenant, you know, our recommendation would be to provide new service equipment.
For $480,000. Okay. And then I just have a couple thoughts if I can share, Mayor, but maybe not related to this report.
Yeah, if it's separate from the report, if you want to hold those,
Okay.
that'd be great. Okay. The other questions on the feasibility report?
And then, yeah, I just had a note here. I think Councilmember Cargill already brought it up. No sales tax soft cost included, or anything existing in the bathroom. So just, there you go. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So again, I'm going to throw it out there one more time. Are there any further questions on the feasibility report at this time? Okay, all right, not hearing any. So then I guess let's go back to Councilmember Kurtz. Do you want to restate your question with regards to planning the funding for the remodel as well?
Yeah, I think my question is, Kyle did a really nice job of putting this one pager together here for just kind of what we're looking forward to, the projects we have in the chute already, and the building cost. But I want to understand, learn more about the costs that we're talking about as far as the tenant improvements and mechanical, architectural, all those costs. And how that also fits in with, you know, our 5 to 10 year plan with maintenance, which comes out of, you know, I think our general fund as far as the maintenance of all this equipment and roofs and all the other things that go along with a new-ish to us building, I guess. So.
Right. And so that's something that, you know, we don't really have a good answer to that today. It's what other sources of funds can we, I guess, go after, procure to help us with, you know, the cost of upgrading the facility. And so that's going to be a discussion that that's potentially ongoing. Certainly nothing that I can point to today saying we should outline or we should allocate these funds for this specific purpose. It is going to be something that is going to be, more of a planning discussion, maybe as we get into the capital facilities workshop discussions during budget season. But yeah, certainly something that I really appreciate us getting our heads wrapped around right now.
And looking at the timeline, Kyle, would you say it's an accurate statement to say that a lot of these funds will obviously be spent in 2023, and the soft cost, the design or pre-ordering some of the equipment, and then with the actual work being done in 2024?
Potentially, yes. And so that's another one that we're going to have to really figure out. Okay, we're fronting this amount for all these costs, but realistically, most of the labor is going to take place in 2024, something along those lines. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable at this point just blanketly saying that the general fund can handle this, because we're taxing the general fund with these purchases and the trailhead down payment. And so having that buffer is very important. And so as Jandy mentioned, going after funding, any other source of funding that we can, anything, as there was some back and forth just a little bit ago on, does this have to be done in the next 18 months? Can this be done in 3 years? Can we appropriately plan for some of these expenses instead of offloading, upwards of, 3.8 million, in the next year for the building purchase? So.
Thank you. All right, Phil, and we jump back to you for your other questions, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Cargill.
Did you call me, Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. If I could speak to Annie's question just a little bit. It's actually good timing to consider replacing half of the units, rooftop units. It's probably good timing to know that, hey, in 10 years, we got to redo the roof some form or fashion. Those are things that you can budget out, include in your 6-year long capital facilities plan, and budget for them like any other building that we might have. So not having all of it at one time is helpful, I guess, is how I look at it. The other part of this equation that I wanted to bring up was, and I've said this many times, today, the library is not broke. And there's an income source here with the existing tenant that we could sit on this building for a fair amount of time, because again, the library is not broke today. And I don't know that it'll be broke next year. But if it's, I forget the number now, but I thought it was 84,000 a year.
Yeah.
For rental income, if we got all of our ducks in a row and got all these grants in place and so on and so on, and pulled the trigger 4 years from now, that's $420,000 that we could apply to this project. Let alone going beyond that, when the library moves out of its current space. I know that we've talked a little bit about the police department taking over that space, but maybe they don't need to for another 4 or 5 years. And maybe we're able to get another 75 grand out of that space for 5 years. So that's how I'm looking at this is how can we secure the building now, afford the improvements, but for me, it doesn't need to happen now. So that's all I have on that.
Right. Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Cargill, I think you had your hand up.
Thanks, Mayor. Here's the way I'm looking at it. I appreciate Councilmember Foyer's comments. Kyle mentioned earlier about how much money we want to have kind of in a reserve, a general fund reserve. And if we do the library purchase at 2.1.5 or whatever the actual number was, let's say 2.1, that's going to take our 2023 ending balance down to 3.5. Is that right?
Correct.
Kyle?
Yeah.
So based on the 2022 budget, that's only about 11% in reserves. I'm assuming the budget is going to go up a little bit next year, but we'll see. That's not a big chunk in reserves. I would feel much more comfortable if we had closer to 15% in reserves. Nevertheless, I was in favor. I originally voted in favor of the purchase of the 2.1 with the caveat that we got to see the costs of what it would cost to turn it into what we need it to be. I think the costs were a lot higher than I was expecting it to be. I was hoping for it to be about 1 million or less. We're at about 1.572 right now. And there are a lot of variables with that, the sales tax, the roof replacement, the AC units, which, as Councilmember Foyer said, can happen over a period of time. So they're not necessarily things that have to happen tomorrow. I think the wild card in this is also the state energy code, which if we get in there and start changing it around and doing a few things, those costs are going to be enormous. And we're already seeing that in buildings all across the state that are trying to comply with these energy code changes. So I'm always nervous about spending big chunks of change. I'm especially nervous when our ending fund balance gets down into the 10% range. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks. And you know, Kyle and I talked earlier, and you know, we really do have we've got, say you guys vote tonight to move ahead. We have we would be contracted to close no later than 30 days. So we actually have another meeting to get into more detail on which specific fund it comes out of, which is why part of the reason we want to go through all the funds, because it seems like there's some different options. There might be some, you know, pick a little bit from this fund, a little bit from that fund. Obviously that's up to you guys, but we do have another meeting to actually make that final determination on what fund it does come from. But obviously we're trying to get as much on the table tonight as we can, so that we know, yes or no, are we going to proceed to escrow and purchase of the building, while we decide which fund exactly it comes out of. So just want to get that note out there.
Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so my same concerns are for if we are, because I've heard several council members speak in favor of taking the building purchase out of the general fund, cutting us so close because the email that Kyle sent out that said financial policies state that we should be no less than 20% of revenues, 3.2 million for 2022. So that's going to be putting it very close when we look at the 2023. Again, we don't know exactly what the revenues are going to be. We're making an estimate. So looking at that and then considering that, you know, 18 months from now, we could be needing to start moving forward on the 1.5 or whatever that works out to be. So that's my biggest concern. And I feel like there's another concern that I have is if we continue to hold on to these ARPA funds, we are going to continue to get asks, and those numbers are going to be whittled down. I know that it seemed to me a council consensus that we wanted to use those funds for a capital project. So being that those funds are going to continue to whittle down if we don't spend them, this is a perfect capital project in my mind. And because of the fact that if we take the funds out of general fund for the building purchase, we're going to be very, I think, too close to that minimum that we need to be at for the general fund. So I would be in favor, perhaps moving forward on the building purchase if we decided to take the funds from ARPA.
All right. Any other comments? Councilmembers Orman, Van Orman, Solberg, Councilmember Dunn. All right, I think I got everybody that time. All right, so hearing no other comments from the council, let me flip back over here to Granicus so I don't lose our spot here. So we read that. Okay, so I guess we're up to our action item with regards to the purchase and sale agreement. So this motion would approve moving forward into escrow and close on the building at 230. Hold on. I think I have the address memorized by now. 23129 East Mission. So do we have a motion?
Question first.
Question first from Councilman Solberg.
When we make this motion, we are not making a motion to use all of this from the general fund Or, and I heard what
No.
Councilmember Spencer was suggesting, potentially using some ARPA funds.
Correct.
We're just in this. Then I move to approve proceeding with the purchase and sale agreement of 23-129 Mission Building, East Mission.
That's great.
Second.
Okay, we have a first from Councilmember Solberg and a second from Councilmember Dunn. All right, any further discussion or questions? Let me get back to Zoom so I can see our online participants here.
Just a
Councilmember
question
Spencer.
of clarification. So is there any reason why we cannot make the determination where those funds are going to come from tonight?
Other than the fact that that's not noticed as part of the meeting and this is a special meeting.
I mean, I don't know if that would preclude us, Sean, I mean.
I guess I'm not quite sure. Is Jed asking that we want to make a determination whether it comes from the general fund or some other source?
Correct.
I don't know that it makes a difference to do that. Certainly, however it is, it's going to have to come back to the council at a different meeting for approval, whether it's through a budget amendment or some other payment form. If there's a desire to have direction to staff to do that, I think it would be all right, just because it's going to come back in another meeting for approval.
Okay. Yeah, I was just hesitant since it's not a listed action item,
Right.
but if you're comfortable with that, Sean.
Yes, sorry, Mayor.
That's okay. So we've got a motion on the floor.
Further discussion?
Go ahead, Councilmember
Thank
Foyer.
you. I agree with Jed. I think we should identify how we're gonna, if we're gonna move. So you're saying make a motion to, do we even want to purchase it? And then another motion tonight to talk about how we're gonna pay for it if the first one passes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Cargill.
So are we saying that we have to pass it first to find out how we pay for it?
Right.
To quote
Yeah,
a
it's
famous
kinda chicken and
politician.
It's kind of a chicken and the egg here.
I agree as well with Councilmember Spencer. I'd feel more comfortable knowing how we're going to pay for it rather than saying, okay, let's buy it and then we'll figure out how to pay for it later. That's obviously not the way we do things in our household budgets, and I would hope it's not the way we do things in the city too.
So if you'd like, Councilmember Solberg can rescind the motion and then we can.
Mayor, we could just.
Why don't we just do an amendment to the motion?
Okay, perfect.
Well,
We could.
we probably should have those as two separate topics. though.
Yes, we could do an amendment, but I think that in the context of what is being approved is just proceeding with the agreement. Keep in mind that the purchase and sale agreement has already been approved as far as its terms and conditions. So there's an additional condition within the contract that allows the city to terminate it if it so chooses based upon the facility investigation, the due diligence period, if you will. So the circumstances is whether or not the council wants to exercise that option under the agreement. So if the council wants to move forward with the purchase, and I'm setting aside the money, but from the standpoint of what the agreement provides, it's essentially saying, does the council want to move forward relative to that provision and waiving it and moving to close? Not an approval of the agreement or not, because that's already occurred at a prior council meeting and the mayor's executed the agreement. There was a due diligence period that the city had in which to conduct this investigation and make a determination. To the extent that you want to figure out an avenue to fund it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there may be varying ways in which to fund it, and council members may have different opinions on that, but there isn't an issue with regard to purchasing it. Now, maybe I'm misstating that, and maybe there's more conversation that needs to be had relative to the funding. But in the sense, I think it's probably more appropriate to have two separate motions, even though you technically probably could do an amendment. But in this circumstance, it's probably better to have two separate ones relative to the funding direction and the approval of the due diligence provision, as I'll call it.
So go ahead, Councilmember Spencer.
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Sean was saying is we've already approved the mayor to purchase this building. That's
Actually, no, so you've approved the purchase and sale agreement, but the next phase of that, if we don't take action by close of business tomorrow, it dies.
right.
That's the trigger point where we are. Do we move forward with going to escrow and then on to close
Right.
is where we are tonight.
Yeah, so it was my understanding that initial approval that we gave was to buy us some time to determine how are we going to pay for this. I feel like tonight is the meeting. We should determine how are we going to pay for this so that we can with confidence say, yes, we want to move forward because we've had time to think about, well, how are we going to pay for this? Because essentially we're just ratifying what we already said, but with no guarantee where those funds are going to come.
Right. Well, and of course, part of that what if in the last couple of weeks was what are those renovation costs going to be? So that was the main trigger there. So Councilmember.
And Mayor, if I may, I would interject. I would just clarify one thing, Jed, that you mentioned. It's the term in the contract with regard to paying. While that applies in the context of what the council will do, the provision of the contract is whether or not the facility is acceptable to the city. So the city the council may make their decision based upon there are so many things wrong with it, for example, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars in which to do it. So therefore we don't want to do it. But it's not a funding issue under the terms of the contract. It's what's the condition of the facility relative to accepting its condition as is and moving forward with closing. So hopefully that makes sense. There's a little nuance there relative to because it's not a financing issue. It's not a financing contingency under the contract. So just so we're clear.
Mayor.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to keep butting in. And I agree with you, Sean. I think because of the fact that we know that we now have at least 1.5 million to put into the building, that's where I believe that the funding issue comes in play, where we now need to have the conversation, knowing that we now have the 2.1 plus the 1.5 plus. Now we need to have the conversation. I realize it's not necessarily a funding issue, but that kind of makes it one in a roundabout way.
Yeah, and I understand. I agree with that. That's correct. I just wanted to make the clarification. The decision may ultimately come about in the same way, but from the standpoint of if the city says no, it's based upon the condition of the facility and not that the city didn't have the funds in which to do it.
Exactly.
So before I go on, so just for clarification, Sean, if we do want to go back to have that funding discussion and decision, first we'll have Councilmember Sahlberg rescind his motion. And then go either, then it depends on what the next motion is. Is the next motion going to be funded out of general fund, or B, funded out of ARP, or C, funded out of a combination of both? But they actually all three need to be separate, correct?
Well, I guess there's specific direction as to where it goes. The other option you could take is you could have a motion and a second and vote on that motion that would move, which is more the amendment side, that would amend Tom's motion to add a funding mechanism to it. So if the council, if someone wanted to make a motion to say, move to use general fund dollars to pay for the purchase and or improvements of the building, you could say something like that to amend the first one. Somebody seconds, you vote on that, you have the funding mechanism, then you go back to the original motion with that amendment.
Councilmember Sahlberg.
So I'm just going to refer back to the notes of the meeting that I missed that McFarland put on, and that this discussion that we've had now is a discussion, not a conversation. It's a debate. I like hearing all the sides, and I agree. I'm more than willing to allow one of the other members to do an amendment, and then we act on it before we act on the primary motion.
There's no objection to that, and I'll take a motion to amend the original motion. Councilmember Dunn.
Madam Mayor, I move that ARP dollars in the amount of 500,000 be used as incorporation for the purchase of the sale agreement, with the balance to come to the general fund.
Okay, before we have a second, let's just clarify that. So the proposed amendment is to approve proceeding with the purchase of the sale agreement for the building at 2132, I think it's actually 231
3129.
East Mission with $500,000 from the ARPA funding and the balance from general fund. Does that sound correct? Councilmember Dunn? All right, you got that, Kelsey? All right, do we have a second to that amendment? Okay, we don't. So we've got that amendment motion dies. We have then we can go on to another amendment, right, Sean? I was trying to keep all these straight. So do we have another motion to amend based on, for the funding? Councilmember Van Orman.
I moved that we utilize part of the REIT funds in the amount of 200,000 from each REIT. REIT 1 for 200,000, REIT 2 for 200,000. And the rest would come from general funds.
All right, so the amendment would be to approve proceeding with the purchase and sale agreement for the building at 23129 East Mission with $200,000 coming out of each of the REIT 1 and REIT 2 funds, with the balance coming from general fund. Okay, do we have a second on that? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so that motion dies. Do we have another motion? On
I'll try.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilmember Kurtz, if we get that far.
Perfect, thank you. I'd like to make an amendment to the motion. Using 1.5 million of the ARP monies and the balance from some form of general fund, REIT 1, REIT 2, don't care.
Okay, so I'll try to state that a little bit more eloquently at the end there for you. So the motion is to amend, it would read, approve proceeding with the purchase and sale agreement for the building at 23129 East Mission with funding coming from consisting of $1.5 million from ARPA, with the balance coming from a combination of the general fund and the 2 REIT funds to be determined.
Nicely said, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have a second from Councilmember Solberg on that. All right, so I'm getting my notes all here. Okay, so we have further discussion on that amendment. So Kelsey, do you want to get that up on the screen just so we have it clear before we start the discussion?
Including the right address.
Yeah, the address is 231.
We're gonna buy someone else's building tonight.
Let's see who that might be. If it gets us the Comcast building, it might be a good deal.
Probably buy our own building again.
Well, then Kelsey's just trying to get that up here. So we have it in view for everybody. Again, for those in the audience, this is only our second meeting using iLegislate, so appreciate your patience as we work through this. It's a great improvement in the end to help Kelsey get minutes correct and for the council to see exact motions and amendments. Or REIT, do we need to specify, Kyle, 1 or 2 for both? General fund, comma, REIT 1, comma, or REIT 2.
I suppose I would like the clarification.
Okay,
General fund and REIT.
and or REIT, how's that?
You can't use the whole REIT fund.
No, with balance coming from general fund
Or
and or.
REIT.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
Does that make, yeah, because that gives us the option.
and so I'll present, and I can present those at an upcoming budget amendment for final approval.
Okay. All right, so we've got the motion in the second. We've got the amended motion up on the screen, Councilmember Solberg and then Councilmember Cargill.
So thank you, Councilmember Dunn, Cargill, Van Orman, Follier and Spencer. I heard what you said about potential use of the ARPA funds. It has not been a big issue with me. And the reason I agreed to Mayor Pro Tem's seconded that is because if we're going to get our It's not our emergency fund. If we want to have our 20%, our wiggle room for our budget, I'd feel more comfortable not draining the general fund.
Got it.
Thank you.
All right, and I think I had Councilmember Cargill next with a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna speak against the motion, not because I don't want it, but just because I'm looking at the numbers here. If we take the 1.5 from ARPA, that gets us down to 300,000 in ARPA. I appreciate being able to keep an ending fund balance at the end of 2023 for the general fund of what would look like to me to be about 5.6, since we're not taking any from general fund, or at least not with this specific motion yet. My concern is that if we say, okay, the remaining 600,000 is going to be from general fund, give or take. Look at our ending fund balances at the end of 2023 and for REIT 1 and REIT 2. It totals 660,000, which means that, let's just say, for the sake of argument, I hope we don't do this, but let's just say we say, okay, all of it's going to come from REIT. That leaves us with $60,000 left in REIT, which again, I look back at the beginning balance in 2022 for both REIT 1 and 2, we were at 870 for REIT 1, 2.1 for REIT 2. If we do nothing with them, we're going to be at 260 and 400,000 respectively. In the general fund, our beginning fund balance obviously was 6.4. It's going to be going down to 5.6, and then our ARPA is going to pretty much disappear, which is fine with me. That's one-time money. I just am concerned about not having any money or very little left over in REIT. Kyle, one question to you. On the Trailhead bond repayment that's in REIT 1 in 2023, it says 200,000. Is that because we only started like in September or halfway through, or?
That is a great question, by the way, because that's a placeholder for that payment. In reality, that payment is probably going to be closer to zero, but I am not comfortable putting that on paper because.
And the reason would be?
So we're going to have increased revenue with the golf operations fund, and any additional monies that come in from that fund is going to be used for repayment first, with REIT coming second.
You mean the trailhead, the bond payment first?
Sorry, yeah. So any excess from golf operations fund would be used for that annual payment first, with REIT coming second.
But the yearly payment for the city, regardless of whether it comes from the golf course or the REIT, is going to be $450. Is that right?
In between 400 and 450. It is unfortunately, it's wildly fluctuating.
Okay,
so
thank you.
And so for clarification, before I jump over, so Kyle, say this amended motion passes, the actual decision on whether to use the balance from the general fund and or REIT comes later.
Correct.
during the
Yeah.
budget
Yep. And I would
process. So
bring,
it's not set in stone.
I would bring two separate scenarios, let's say, and have council choose one.
So that would be a further council action
Yeah.
as to where that balance would come from.
Correct.
Okay. Mayor, still getting used to not calling you mayor.
That's okay.
Councilmember Van Orman.
Kyle, can you kind of refresh all of the council members how those REIT funds are replenished?
So that is, it's 0.25% of the sale of real property within the city. And so we have two separate funds. By RCW, you can establish these funds as a first quarter percent and a second quarter percent. So where we see activity is, purchase agreements, construction, and just overall general health of a growing city is reflected in the REIT funds.
So as we see and grow up over the next year, all of those funds are.
We are anticipating with, these businesses coming into town, these, large payments.
But it's so
reflected in
we
those
got,
funds.
so for instance, we got the REIT funds on the purchase of the land where Western States CAT is.
Correct,
Sales tax on the building of it.
correct.
But you've accounted for that already.
Yes, and so in our annual, 600,000 a year replenishing each fund is aggressive, but we have outpaced that consistently, and there isn't any major red flags that we've seen to tell us that construction and expansion within our city limits is slowing down.
Do you mind if I follow one up?
Go ahead.
There's only specific things that we can use REIT funds for,
Yes,
and this would be one of them.
correct. Yep. Public facilities is one specifically outlined.
All right, Councilmember Kurtz or Foyer? Anything from your side? I keep forgetting to look at my screen for you. I apologize.
Yeah, thank you. The intent behind my amendment was just to give us as much flexibility at a future time to discuss how to pay for this thing.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Kurtz, anything?
No, I appreciate the use of the potential use of the ARPA funds if we pass it, because I think that one of the things that have been mentioned several times by different council members is having instead of small little purchases that are go unnoticed, having something tangible for the community to understand how we spent the money. And I feel like this is a really good use of that money and leaves us still with the ability to live within our own financial policies with our funding source. So I'm excited about this particular amendment.
Right, thank you. All right.
One last comment, Mayor, if I can,
Go ahead.
and maybe is Jonathan still on? No, it looks like he's left. A new building would be 6 to 8 million. So thank you.
Thank you. All
Mayor,
right.
I haven't
Councilmember
spoken
Spencer.
on this particular amendment. So at our last meeting, I wanted to kind of talk, big picture. We've got a lot of different things that we're working on currently. I'm not particularly excited about the fact that we're going to be going into debt for the Trailhead project. And so the way I'm looking at these funds, again, we've got 1.5 plus that we're going to be needing to do for improvements. And then we've got some things down the line for roof and et cetera on this potential building. I feel like this is part of what got us into this position in the first place, that we didn't have the funds set aside for Trailhead. And so now we're looking at having to go in debt to do that. I feel like we've got these funds from ARPA. Really, all I'm trying to do is position things so that we're not touching our general fund, if at all possible, in the immediate future, so that we can perhaps look at general funds to put more towards the Trailhead project. Again, I know that's not part of this discussion per se, but that's the reason why I'm thinking let's use these ARPA funds. As we look at the 2022 expenses for ARPA, we've got down there $500,000 for public works. Excuse me. Okay, I was thinking that we were talking about Liberty Lake Sewer. So we haven't even talked about possibly putting some funds towards that. Again, I think what I really want to hear is what is the objection to using ARPA funds solely for this building purchase?
No, it doesn't look like we have enough. Based on we don't have
So-
2.175.
Yeah, and Mayor, if I may,
available.
so in putting this puzzle together, which is what it is, we have projects and we have funds, and we have to find placeholders in funds for these different projects. And so in kind of relaying this information to council, I made assumptions that we would eventually use ARPA funds if we didn't have any other source for them, for that assistance in completing the public works building, for the trailhead at the water line at Trailhead. And so those by no means are in pen, those are in light pencil, and those are council's decisions to make. Those were just assumptions made to identify all of the projects that we currently have.
Just as a point of clarification, I understood that the council had approved before I was approved to use general funds for the public works building. Was that not confirmed?
So the approval was to proceed with the project with the elevated cost associated with it.
Okay, so funds weren't.
But and we were going to reconcile that with the budget amendment.
Okay.
To determine those source of funds.
Question.
I think,
Okay.
I
go.
think Tom is probably gonna ask the same question I'm
All right,
gonna
go
ask.
ahead, Tom. Councilmember
Calling for
Solver,
the
go ahead.
question.
Call the question.
I'm calling for a question.
Okay, well, that takes a vote. So all in,
Go ahead.
is there a vote? Do we all in favor of calling the question? Do I see any online? All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Out of. Okay, so ayes have, any opposed? I still have to call for that. 1, 2, 3. All right, ayes have it. So we'll go ahead and go to the vote. All right, so that being said, this vote is on the amendment only. Once that is approved or not, then we go back to approve the full motion. So those in favor of approving the amendment to the motion, which would include the funding consisting of 1.5 million from ARPA with the balance from general fund and or REIT, please say aye. Hold your hands.
Aye.
Okay, and then is our votes popping up on iLegislate yet, Kelsey? It's not working. Okay, so keep your hands up. Let me get you. We have. Okay, looks like I have 4 in favor. Wait, 5. 1, 2, 3. I've got 5 in favor, those opposed. And we have 2 opposed. All right, so the amendment passes. So we are back to voting on the amended motion, which is to approve proceeding with the purchase and sale agreement for the building at 23129 East Mission with funding consisting of 1.5 million from ARPA with the balance from general fund and or REIT. So all in favor of the amended motion, please raise your hand and keep it up there, please. So, I'm writing these down so Kelsey and I can reconcile later. Councilmember Foyer, I didn't catch. Okay. All right. So it looks like I have 5 in favor and those opposed. And I have 2 opposed. All right. So it looks like we have a past motion. We are proceeding with the purchase of the building. So thanks everybody for the great discussion. A lot of things had to come out tonight. So really appreciate your patience with the discussion. And so tomorrow, Kyle and I will get together first thing in the morning and we will take the next steps and I'll give the broker a call. All right, so we do have time for, let me switch back here. So any additional citizen comments? So we do have another time for citizen comments. So those in chambers, just go ahead and line up at the podium if you'd like, or turn in a yellow form. And then those online who'd like to say a few words in 3 minutes or less, please shoot a note to Todd Henderson in the chat. So it looks like we've got Brad Hamlet back up.
Yep. Brad Hamlet. I would like to thank the council for their thoughtful discussion tonight and their ultimate decision to move forward with the purchase of the building. Although I do see a need for improvements in the building, and I know it's going to cost some money, I think it's a wise decision moving forward because building a brand new facility is, in my opinion, probably not even on the books, not even under consideration. So this purchase allows the library to expand, improve, and provide much needed additional services to our community. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate that. I know there's a lot of work going forward. But this is the first step in a positive direction. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. It looks like next up we have DG Garcia, and your phone has been trying to connect the whole time you've been sitting here.
I know.
I didn't know if you knew that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Thank you for voting for the amended recommendation and for providing the library, because the library is equal knowledge. Knowledge is brain food. We want to continue to keep filling our children's heads with enough brain food as possible. And I understand your stewardship with the money and how it relates. And I'm glad that you voted on that as well, but we will not hold you accountable should the cost of goods, services, construction and development go beyond what you've allocated today? Because we know in perhaps days and weeks to come, everything and the price of everything will go up. And it will put us at another strain, but it is worth the payment. And I appreciate and value your all of what you've done in regards to the library. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Tim Olson.
Just a quick word. I'm a numbers guy. If you don't know me, I appreciate the argument or the conversation tonight on both sides. I truly appreciate the conservative nature of this council and not whittling our funds down to where we're into danger zone. I truly do. However, I do recognize the opportunity here. And being a numbers guy, if you look at this cost all in, you're about $283 a square foot for the remodeling of this current building and the purchase. If Hoyer's right, and this is a $7 million building, we're looking over $483 to build one. To me, it just makes sense. We have the funds available. I really appreciate all the discussion that happened tonight so we can make sure we've got the funds necessary. But I think it's a great opportunity for this council to put the library on the right path for a full build out in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. We appreciate it. All right, do we have anybody online, anybody left, who might want to make a citizen comment? Todd, do you have any notes from anybody? Okay, not seeing or hearing any. We flip back here to I legislate, make sure we're getting in. Okay, looks like number 8 is adjournment. So if there's nobody is opposed, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for your time.